Good evening. Welcome to Inside Asia. India is on the rise and is on the headline almost every day. This year also is a commemorative year of ASEAN India 20th anniversary. Today's program we have Ambassador Anil Wadhwa, who will discuss the prospect of ASEAN-India cooperation and what is in store. Good evening, Ambassador Anil Wadhwa. Thank you for joining our program.
Thank you.
This year is very auspicious years. For India and ASEAN is a commemorative years for the 20th anniversary. Can you tell me what India has in store to promote ASEAN and India relations?
Well, as you know, we are now celebrating the 20th year of our ties, and we are also celebrating the 10th anniversary when we actually entered into a dialogue with ASEAN. So it's a very special year, 2012. And in this year, therefore, at the end of the year, which is going to be December this year, we are going to have this commemorative summit. But as a run-up to this summit, we have a number of other meetings and programs, events, and that continues throughout the year. It starts off with a number of ministerial meetings in the beginning of 2012 in 5 different disciplines, ranging from agriculture to environment, and we also have the trade ministers meeting. After that, we have the Delhi dialogue, the 4th in the series, which has been held in the past as well. But we also have thereafter a series of meetings related to think tanks, to eminent persons group which has been set up between the 2 countries. We also have cultural troops and cultural evenings which will be organized throughout the year. We will have an international ASEAN-wide trade fair which will be held in New Delhi, plus the trade bodies of all ASEAN countries will be meeting at the same time. And in addition to that, we have a car rally, which is a very novel idea, which will in fact pass through Thailand twice. Also, we have a sailing ship which will go around all the ASEAN countries and come back to India at the end of it. The car rally will actually culminate in New Delhi while the summit is on. And while the summit is on, we also have a number of cultural troops performing at the same time. So it's a full calendar throughout the year.
I see. But among all these activities, which area India has given the sort of the focus, the full attentions? In which area? Because there are many dimensions of ASEAN-India relations.
That's right. I think we focused a lot in the beginning on our cultural and scientific exchange. But over the years, this relationship has turned very much economic. It has a lot to do with bilateral trade, with investments. And at the same time, we have diversified into new fields like new forms of energy. And then, of course, information technology, which is another new dimension of this cooperative relationship. And all these years have seen progress in a number of new areas which we feel we can build upon in the future. There is also the issue of connectivity between India and ASEAN, which was not actually so prominent when we began this relationship. But in recent years, it's become much more prominent, especially because the ASEAN study groups themselves have recommended that our relationship could grow by leaps and bounds if we had that connectivity with the northeast of India. And so we are very keen ourselves to implement this aspect of that relationship.
But the connectivity is go through Mumbai because it's part of the broader East-West corridors. It's now ASEAN has a plan to link Mumbai with Bangkok and also with Da Nang and then the rest of ASEAN archipelago. That is a big project.
That's a larger project, but of course we have to focus first upon the linkage between our northeastern region and the connectivity with Myanmar, with Thailand, with Vietnam, Laos and Cambodia. Once we have this in place, then we have the port connectivity from Thailand into Myanmar and into India. And then, of course, this larger project that you're talking about, which is in any case going to be supplemented by the East-West corridor, which India is building already between New Delhi and Mumbai. We are talking in terms of large-scale connectivity in the coming years, and this region, as we all know, is a region of growth. It's very dynamic, and I'm sure with these kind of connectivities, the region will certainly generate much more fruitful results.
Was this the reason why you invited Thai Prime Minister Yingluck Shinawatra to visit New Delhi and be part of the top guest list during the Independence Day parade?
This is one of the reasons, of course, because Thailand has has not sent a leader who's been on the chief guest for a Republic Day parade for some time, and also it's a part of India's Look East policy. Over the last few years, if you look at our guest list, the chief guests for our Republic Day, many of them have come from the region, and over the past 2 or 3 years, I would say the relationship with Thailand has become even more dynamic. Our trade is doing very well, and last year it crossed $7 billion, and we hope that by 2012 this will easily cross $12 billion. We are in the process of finishing off our free trade agreement in goods and services and investments, and we hope that will be finished by the middle of 2012. And after that, we can see some faster economic results between the two countries. Our initial goods agreement, which started in 2003, has seen successful results in the bilateral trade side, and we are very encouraged by that trend. But it's not just trade and investment, it's also the question of people-to-people contacts. As you know, close to 1 million Indians come to Thailand every year on tourism and business, and this number is bound to increase. And our connectivity of air flights, for instance, is going to be a major catalyst. We have as many as 140 flights a week already between the two countries. There's room for more, so this will also grow in the future. And we certainly hope that our shipping ties will increase as trade grows and as our ports can take in more capacity.
But much less number of Thai tourists visiting India.
Yes, comparatively speaking, we issue about half the number of visas from our embassy and the outsourced office that we have here in Bangkok for people to visit India. And many of them are foreign tourists, they're not Thais. Even if the number is not as much at the moment, we are trying to develop new facilities for Buddhist travelers. For instance, in our northern part of the country, in the northeast part of the country, we have a new trail called the Buddha's Trail.
That's right.
And that is very popular with Buddhist tourists and amongst the Thais, and the popularity of that route is growing because 7 of those places where Buddha was associated with are in India. We will develop those areas much more in the future, and I'm sure that with that kind of attractiveness, the Buddhist tourism will also grow. But we are hoping also that we will have more business travelers to India from Thai companies, and this can only happen if we have an increase in our investments, an increase in our trade. So all this goes in parallel.
I see. So are there any others Buddhist tourists from, say, Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar, Sri Lanka, or the so-called Buddhist communities?
Yes, all of them. This route is very popular amongst the Buddhist travelers from these countries as well. And this is a major connect between us. And we certainly hope to make sure that we continue to build on this connectivity.
You mentioned the Look East policy by the former Prime Minister Narasimha Rao. It was announced in 1991 in Singapore.
You're right.
Looking back, can you elaborate a little bit? What were the major changes? Because at the time, your Look East is really Look East. You look to Japan, you look to South Korea, but I feel that the little bit change, you now cover much more ground. For example, in Southeast Asia, you're part of East Asia Summit. Could you elaborate a little bit?
I think even at that time when this policy was elaborated, Prime Minister Narasimha Rao had in mind the ASEAN countries primarily. Japan and Korea, of course, were growing economically, and they were getting connected with ASEAN at that point in time. So we naturally had to take that into account. Our Look East policy from ASEAN suddenly became a bigger region, and it then went on to encompass these two countries which you mentioned. But primarily the focus was with ASEAN, because at that point in time ASEAN was a big growth factor in the world. It still is today. And if you look at the world situation at this moment, at this point in time, you find that all the growth takes place in the East. And therefore, this is the driving force for the world economy. We feel that we have been vindicated in this policy, and we feel that we need to build upon this even further, and we want to integrate even further with the ASEAN countries.
But India look at ASEAN through the eyes of economics, cooperation, investment. India has been very timid in the area of political and security cooperation. I would argue. Why was that?
I think we have not been timid. We have common security interests in terms of our guarding of the sea lanes, for instance, in cooperation in customs, in cooperation in Coast Guard activities, also with regard to a number of joint exercises that we have with a number of countries in ASEAN and in this region. And we basically want to ensure that we have a good, sound, all-round relationship. We are not here only for security ties. Of course, they are very important, and the security ties have always existed for a very long time. So we feel that without undue emphasis on any one aspect, and our ties have to grow in every field. We are very happy that we have a wonderful base for this because of our cultural ties with these countries, including Thailand. And these are ancient relationships dating back to 7th to the 8th century.
Yes.
And therefore, we've just built upon them over the centuries. And now we've come to discover the economic strengths of each other. And on this basis, we will have a flow into other activities as well. I don't think that we are shy, therefore, of any activity.
Well, India is the apple pie, motherhood of Southeast Asia. Everybody know that. But Southeast Asian country always, want to see India more assertive in promoting political and security operations with this part of the world. I sense that very, very strongly, and for a number of reasons, of course. But I like to ask your opinion because of late, it seems to me that India has finally stepped out, looking outward, want to expand its political and security relations with Western country, including Southeast Asia. But I think Southeast Asia need a lot more work. What do you say?
You're right over there. I think that aspect of the relationship definitely needs some more efforts on all sides. But I think as far as India is concerned, we have a foreign policy today that looks to all countries and in fact, we look at the world in concentric circles. And let me explain how that is. First of all, it's the South Asian region and our immediate neighborhood, which is extremely important to any country. In fact, if you want to grow peacefully, you must have good relations with your neighborhood. ASEAN, of course, is our extended neighborhood. And with
We
Thailand,
share borders with Thailand,
with
maritime
Thailand we have a
borders.
maritime boundary as well. So we are actually neighbors, and we therefore look at ASEAN, as a very important segment of the world, with whom we must have all-round development, and that's what I was referring to earlier. And even with other countries who are far away from us, today the world, as we all know, is interdependent. It's a globalized world, and we have trade with countries in Europe, in Latin America, with Japan, faraway countries from India. But actually they have a lot of stake in us, and we have a lot of stake in them. So this interdependence of the world has made it necessary today to make sure that we have an all-round development of foreign policy. And therefore, we follow those principles in our foreign policy, and we want to maintain a peaceful neighborhood in order to have a conducive atmosphere in which the economy can grow, so that our people can come to a certain level of living.
Well, in fact, India became some sort of a special dialogue partner of ASEAN when India acceded to Treaty of Amity 2003 at the same time of China. And there were a lot of expectation among ASEAN countries. And now this year, the commemorative years, both sides would like to establish what we describe as strategic partner.
Yes.
And in that strategic partner, can you outline to me, what are the crucial elements and ingredients?
I think a strategic partner is one with whom you can fully depend and you can have full trust in. And also a relationship that is trouble-free, a relationship that has a lot of promise to grow in the future, and at the same time a relationship where you feel that you have both to give and to take. So I would define a strategic partnership in those terms. You are right when you say that it is time that we raise this strategic partnership with ASEAN as well. In fact, in the joint communique that we will probably issue after the visit of the Prime Minister of Thailand, we will certainly refer to this aspect of our relationship. We've come a long way from mere partners in the cultural and the economic side. And today we have a number of cooperative areas, and this will be reflected also in the number of MOUs that we will sign during the visit. We are making steady progress in all fields today, and we have an interdependence which we did not have earlier. We have consequently trust in the relationship which has been brought about as a result of these exchanges.
So you see Thai-India relations as a linchpin to the broader ASEAN relation or not? Because you think that, for example, close cooperation between Thailand and India could be sort of emulated, expand to include other ASEAN countries, or you can do it within the ASEAN context. I will give you one example. In the early 1990s, India and Thailand are the only two countries in Asia that have aircraft carrier. And there were talk at that time to promote cooperation, naval exercise, including upgrading the weapon system, that sort of thing. But tell me, is this kind of things that you like to see India, expand to cover beyond Thailand?
Well, I think you referred to two or three important elements here. And you talked about the naval aspect in which both India and Thailand were preeminent in the past. I think we still are. We have continued this relationship. We've had 12 rounds of naval exercises, which are friendly exercises, and we maintain a certain amount of information flow between our two countries. We also cooperate in the Army and in the Air Force fields. We certainly are aware that we have to talk about threats to our security. So that is one aspect of the relationship. What is also very important is that we started off, we were the only, Thailand was the first country in the ASEAN to have started off the free trade negotiations with India. And that started in 2003. Now we are in a situation where we are trying to expand our free trade agreement in goods, which is a limited agreement, into services and also into investments. And we certainly hope that will be finished by the middle of 2012. But at the same time, we've also caught up with these negotiations with ASEAN. With ASEAN, our goods agreement has gone into force in January 2011. And at the same time, we have a deadline around the same time of finishing the ASEAN negotiations. But Thailand is a very important country for us because Thailand is a path breaker. And it is with Thailand that we started these negotiations. And I'm certain that we will complete the negotiations with Thailand even before the ASEAN negotiations are over because that is what gets translated eventually into our relationship with ASEAN. So from that aspect, I think this relationship is actually a path-breaking relationship.
I see. So being India is on the rise, and oftentimes because of the extensive relation ASEAN has with other dialogue partners, for example, Japan, China, South Korea, and some of the Western world. ASEAN always compare the grouping relations with other country, particularly with China, and India always come into the pictures. Do you think it's fair to compare India and China, whatever China has done to ASEAN? People always put into that sort of a comparative perspective, saying that China has done that, India hasn't started yet.
I think it's only natural that when you're dealing with a grouping such as this, and you have two larger neighboring countries who are engaged with you, that you start this comparison. But we are not in competition with China. We are India and China is China. And China has its own relationship with ASEAN, its own policies, and we follow our own policies and relationship. As I told you, we have a relationship which is based on different fundamentals and different foundations. But at the same time, I'm sure both of us have the desire of expanding this relationship. How we do it, the modalities will differ. And we have our modalities which we feel are on the right track. And it will eventually be a very solid foundation on which our relationship with ASEAN will be based.
Well, that is the end of our first portion of the conversations with Ambassador Anil Wadhwa. We will continue tomorrow. Good night. สวัสดีครับ